Liberal Currents presents Half the Answer with your hosts, Caitlin M. Green and Trent R. Nelson.
Happy days are here again, and well, understanding a question is half an answer, and this is, of course, Half the Answer with your hosts, Trent R. Nelson and Caitlin M. Green. And wouldn't you know, we just chat with the most interesting and marvelous of folks. We are certainly grateful for the education each and every week. Caitlin, well, who is the marvelous gift that you have brought us this day?
Oh, yet again I come bearing gifts, Trent. You know I never come empty-handed, and I have brought you Hagen Blix. This is a friend of mine from the internet, a cognitive scientist, linguist, and AI researcher. Along with Ingeborg Glimmer, he wrote a book called Why We Fear AI on the Interpretation of Nightmares. I want to ask him all about AI. There it is. Take a look, video viewers. You can see it right there. So guys who are famous for telling everybody that they're smart have hyped the promise of AI as our path to a futuristic utopia. Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz thinks that AI is quite possibly the most important and best thing our civilization has ever created, certainly on par with electricity and microchips, and probably beyond those. The development and proliferation of AI, far from a risk that we should fear, is a moral obligation that we have to ourselves, to our children, and to our future. In May 2024, Elon Musk teased a kind of Star Trek post-scarcity luxury communism situation, saying, if you want to do a job that's kind of like a hobby, you could do a job. But otherwise, AI and the robots will provide any goods and services that you want. He thought we could have some kind of universal high income to replace our jobs and free us up to focus on human stuff. But the dangers are hyped too. Neil deGrasse Tyson has said, time to behave, so when artificial intelligence becomes our overlord, we've reduced the reasons for it to exterminate us all. Sam Altman, OpenAI CEO, said at a venture capital conference, I think the best case is like so unbelievably good that it's hard for me to even imagine. Just so unbelievably good that you sound like a really crazy person to start talking about it. And the bad case, and I think this is like important to say, is like lights out for all of us. In 2016, Stephen Hawking said, we cannot predict what we might achieve when our own minds are amplified by AI. Perhaps with the tools of this new technological revolution, we will be able to undo some of the damage done to the natural world by the last one, industrialization. Today, the ways AI is messing with our daily lives seem to stem from overuse or under supervision of the activities of AI. The servers and processing centers that make it work take up huge amounts of land, pollute the neighborhoods, and even leave communities without power or water. Usually those communities are poor, predominantly Black, Latina, Indigenous, and have already disproportionately been subjected to having their health, homes, and businesses sacrificed to the whims of industry. About a quarter of the posts on Facebook are AI generated, and 50% of your Instagram feed is content recommended by AI. Academic papers get shared around with AI-generated figures of stuff like a rat with giant testicles and a penis labeled it's unreadable, sorry. Published papers contain phrases like, certainly, here is a possible introduction for your topic, and I'm very sorry, but I don't have access to real-time information or patient-specific data, as I am an AI language model. Kids get disappointed when the magical chocolate factory experience does not, in fact, offer the promised Carchitons, Exarstadre lollipops, or even a paradise of sweet teats. Politicians are using ChatGPT to generate parts of their policies, like Andrew Cuomo, who needed some help on his housing platform, or the Doge Boys using an AI assistant to generate the ridiculous tariff rates Trump unveiled this year. Ironically, it is Musk himself who turns out to be the worst offender in using AI for dystopian nonsense. Musk's Doge is using AI to surveil federal agency communications to identify expressions of disloyalty. The Doge Boys seem totally obsessed with AI, telegraphing on their social media accounts their attitude that it can basically do anything. And these are the bros who have access to all of our personal information, including citizenship status, social security eligibility, taxes now, I guess. I don't know. Musk is also using unpermitted methane gas burning turbines to power his XAI facility in Memphis, generating enough electricity to power a city, pumping carcinogenic gas into the air of several residential neighborhoods, which are historically Black. They have contracts to draw 150 megawatts of electricity from the Memphis local utility, which is enough to power 100,000 homes a year. AI is also being used to commit genocide. The Gospel, an AI powered system that the Israeli military uses to generate 100 bombing targets per day, including houses with whole families inside, addressing the problem they were having where they would run out of human verified targets to bomb. There's Lavender, which goes through surveillance data of every single individual in Gaza and gives them a rating for how likely they are to be a militant. Getting a high enough rating puts you on a kill list. Another tool called Where's Daddy tells the army when a possible militant is in their family home so they can bomb them there. In some ways, the dire warnings of the AI tech bros seem like they are ringing true, but in a lot of ways, they took on the timber of magical thinking and a decoupling of the realities of human actions from the results AI has wrought and threatens to wreak. So, we've brought on Hagen Blix, a cognitive scientist and an AI researcher, to help us understand what's going on with the discourses and decisions around artificial intelligence. Hagen, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. That was a great introduction.
Oh, good. Okay. I hope it
It's
was
hard to
accurate.
keep all the crazy things that are happening simultaneously, like
Mm-hmm.
on one's mind, right?
Yeah. So in the
Right.
introduction to your book, you put that Sam Altman quote, which was about like, it's just like the best thing in the whole world and also the worst thing in the whole world.
Yeah.
Um, and so your focus is on what it does when we focus on this like end of the world stuff, right? That like AI could destroy us all. So why don't we start by can you give us like a real definition of what AI really means?
Yeah, I mean, I think largely it's a marketing term that has been used in all kinds of weird ways. I mean, it's based on the continuing development of certain kinds of statistical models that we call machine learning, often called deep learning, where deep, I feel like, is already one of these words that has this strangely loaded sense, right? It's almost, I think one of the things you
Yeah.
say in the book is that it feels almost like it's the deep from, Lovecraft's The Deep Ones.
Oh, sure.
Incomprehensible monsters that will drive you mad if you even look at them. But really, it's about how these so-called artificial neural networks are layered, and the neural network is called deep when it has more than two layers. So there's an input layer and an output layer normally, and if you have some stuff happening in between where
Then
these
it's deep.
nodes are connected, then it's called deep, right?
Yeah.
So there's
Honestly,
a sense,
learning is also, I have questions about the learning part.
very fair, very fair. Yeah. But so there's a sense in which these technologies, that the basis of which has been proposed in the 50s, um, and the perceptron by Rosenblatt, was always used in military applications. I think that's also important to just at least mention that the first time any of these neural networks was put into practice, it was by the CIA, I think in 58, when they built the perceptron that was used for, I believe, identifying potential military targets automatically from satellite data. Right, but so these are kind of classificatory systems, right? So you want to build an algorithm that, I don't know, can tell you whether there's a cat in a picture or something or not, right? And there've been historically been very many different ways of trying to get computers to do this kind of thing. The cat is the fun example. Are there tanks or factories or whatever in the satellite
Right.
image, or the thing that we just talked about, the IDF uses of like, well, is someone home where we can bomb them, or are they not at home? That kind of thing. You build a system that can classify these kinds of things from large amounts of data. And I think that used to just be called machine learning. And then we got this marketing hype that comes in waves, calling it artificial intelligence. And I think there's a real economic desire that this term kind of captures. And the reason why this term resonates, with the venture capitalists,
Mhm.
And I think that's because they really want to imagine that it's kind of a general purpose tool, right?
Yep.
That it can
Right.
kind of do everything. And I don't have any evidence for this, but I suspect that it's not an accident that ChatGPT, that the uh, pre-trained transformer is named that way, because GPT in the economic realm generally means general purpose technology, right? So it's
Oh
about
wow,
things
yeah.
like electricity, which like didn't have one applications, but like had applications
Right.
in all kinds of things, right?
Mhm.
Maybe writing is a general purpose technology, right? It's not like specific to one kind of task. It is the kind of technology that infused all kinds of other human and maybe more narrowly economic activities. And so that's kind of I think that's part of the economic hope from the perspective of venture capitalists or capitalists more broadly, that
Right.
has kind of pushed this shift to calling it artificial intelligence rather than machine learning.
I feel like part of it is also these guys are like huge dorks, right? So they want to in Terminator, they want to live in the Matrix, they want to live in these movies
Yeah,
and books and things, right?
Right.
And so like you are actually prone to like grandiose language when your like frame of mind is about these books and movies.
Right. But again, to your point, Hagen, that is such an interesting observation, because you look at how it's pushed on everyone, and it is literally an all-purpose instrument. It is don't don't learn how to write an email properly. Let the computer do it. Don't like respond to your loved one. Let the computer do it. Don't like figure out how to put all of this data in some comprehensible form for everyone. Let the computer do it. Just
Oh
and
yeah.
and I just don't know what that really leaves us with as it concerns, as Caitlin noted, right, human stuff. Like,
Yeah,
aren't these all of the human things that we're trying
right.
to have free time to do? I don't
We keep
understand.
getting promised that like it's gonna do the nasty grunt work and we'll do the human stuff, but then we see these ads for the AI personal assistants and it looks like they're telling you what to like get your husband for his birthday or like what to say at a party. And like that's not
Let
the
it paint for you. Let it make music for you.
let it
Let
yeah, let it make a
so
movie
so that
trailer.
you finally have time to do the dishes because you don't need to
Exactly.
paint or write poetry or all these horrible, dreadful things that humans hate doing.
Yeah, the computers will do it for you. Don't worry. Yeah, I mean there keep being these posts from the like AI lover bros who are like, "Oh my god, it's so over for writers," or like Hollywood is so dead, and then they show you this like horrible AI generated nonsense thing where like the main
Right.
character looks like a different guy every shot. The lighting makes no sense and like he's got a different car in this scene from this scene and you're like, in what sense then? Is it over for Hollywood because you're making better stuff, or is it over for Hollywood because people are going to give you money to make this stuff and not the Hollywood people?
Right, right. I mean, I feel like there's an interesting echo there of the political situation that we find ourselves in, right? It feels like, there's famously Steve Bannon's motto to flood the zone with shit,
Oh
right?
my gosh.
To stop anybody from reacting with that. And I feel like in a very deep sense, there's a lot of these resonances between how
Right.
AI is operating in this space and how the far
Yeah.
right is operating in this space. The aesthetic, the I think very deeply the desire to not commit to what you're saying, right? To make everything that you're saying kind of disposable, right? I feel like you talked about that in your episode on masculinity, that sense of like you just invent another thing to get your viewers upset about, and then somebody comes and says, actually, you made this up. You totally took this quote out of context or whatever, right? There's always
Right.
something where there's just a lie generated, but they don't want to commit to what they're saying because it's not about the content, it's about the emotional
Right.
state that is generated, that is supposed to keep
Right.
bringing people back, and that gets people angry at something that feels like it's related to very real bad things in their life, but that doesn't offer a possibility other than this helpless rage that you can only reproduce by watching the next show.
Yeah,
So I feel like there's a very deep similarity there somehow between
for
that
sure.
and this AI art generation, which is also like it generates not art, it generates something really disposable, that you have no commitment to, that you can't actually hold dear,
Mhm.
and that the producers don't hold dear, right? They just
Right.
want to have this be quickly impressed. And like, don't get me wrong, I do think a lot of these technologies are extremely impressive in on many technological ways, right? It is quite fascinating to have a computer that can generate an image from a prompt, right? That was
Right.
quite unimaginable just a few short years ago, right? It is quite fascinating to see these things being like reasonably good at like light coding tasks and all these things, right? They're interesting machines. And I think when it's not this general purpose thing, and when it's not trying to, undermine artists and whatever, I think they're reasonable applications, right? I mean, the famous one is Google's AlphaFold, which is predicting protein folding, which like makes a lot of laboratory tasks easier. Like a lot of times verifying a hypothesis is maybe easier. There's I just saw an article about using machine learning to predict whether somebody's suffering from celiac disease from like a picture of a biomedical sample, which is the kind of stuff where machine learning can be very good
Yeah.
if you very carefully have a well circumscribed domain and very carefully generated data. It can be very good at separating noise from signal, right? And so
It's
these
just
are the
sort of
kinds of things.
is there a cat or not in the photo type
Yeah,
tasks.
yeah, yeah.
Or if you watched Silicon Valley, hot dog or not a hot dog. Right?
Right. But Hagen, what you're describing seems to me to be more of the accentuation of the human ability with this aid, right? It not replacing our human functionality solely with this thing.
Right.
And I think that's where historically, whether it be in music or in spinning machines or anything, like we want something that makes our life easier, but doesn't necessarily take away the pleasure or the process of doing the thing.
Right.
Uh,
Or
and-
just richer, right? I mean, like nobody thought the great thing about a synthesizer or an electric guitar was that it's finally easier to play guitar now. No, it was like that you
right,
could do
You
things
could
now
close
that
it
you
down.
couldn't
Yeah.
do before, right?
right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I
You're
think that
talking to, yeah, Trent is a musician, so
yeah,
yeah.
That's
yeah,
exactly what I was thinking of, is like the people that were so frustrated with the Moog synthesizer and all of these machines. And Pink Floyd in Live at Pompeii has a quote where, Roger Waters is like, the machines couldn't do what we're doing with them unless we were doing it. It's just an expression of self through this new medium. And that, I think, is always beautiful and positive in artistic ways. But why, they want us to go into the coal mines. They sell us that it's going to take over the coal mine work, but then they're like, no, this thing would be better painting. Eh, eh, I
It's
don't
so funny
understand.
that like the guys that are selling this, like it's the best of possible worlds, it's the possibly worst of possible worlds, like those same guys are also like trying to get billions of dollars out of SoftBank to build these crazy servers in my home state of Arizona. That's where I'm from. It's very annoying. um like I was just looking at a map and just being like, oh, Phoenix is like covered in these things, cool. And using these unpermitted turbines to power the thing and sucking power out of the power plants of the the towns and the counties and things. And yeah, the grid. Thank you, Hagen. I do know words. Right, that like it's the same dudes. And so what you pointed to in the book, which I really loved, was that AI doomerism, like AI is a generally intelligent entity that's like gonna do Independence Day on us, like that's gonna come down and destroy us, is actually a kind of way of overstating the power of AI and creating this sense of like how amazing it really can be, which only really serves to benefit the people who are trying to sell AI to us, right?
yeah. And yet there's something really worth wondering about, right? It's not like when somebody invents a new, I don't know, air conditioning, their first sales pitch is like it's gonna freeze you all to death if you're not careful. Our AC is so good it might like kill you all if you turn it up too high.
I feel like maybe
Right?
venti that, like the bubble gum, the minty gum, where they're
Uh,
watch out, it's powerful, right? Or like Altoids. Or
Altoids,
something.
right? Altoids, but that is such a great point.
Right.
We never do that with anything else. Like this car could drive so fast you might smash through a wall and die.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like it's true, right? It would be
Yeah.
probably more true in the car situation. So yeah,
Well,
so one of
maybe
the starting
that's
points of the book is kind of to be like, why is it that this is a sales pitch? But also, why is it that this question resonates with people who don't sell these things, right? Like the newspapers wouldn't keep printing these kinds of stories if people didn't click on them, right? If people
Right.
didn't read them. And people are worried about all kinds of things about AI. And so, yeah, one of the basic perspectives that we're trying to get to in the book is kind of to say, well, maybe these kinds of stories of destruction or the machines taking over resonate with different people for different reasons, right? And I think it's very clear that, yeah, one reason for the people who sell these kinds of objects, the people who have access to billions of dollars, people we call capitalists in the book.
Mhm.
One of the reasons is, yeah, they wanna make them seem very powerful. Another reason is that there has been for a while a pivot again to where these things come from, that is namely military applications. And if you're trying to sell military applications, then the pitch of like, oh, this might destroy a lot of humans doesn't sound so off anymore, right? If you're like
Right.
saying, well, this thing is supposed to help you code, but also it might kill you, that's really strange. But if you're saying, well, this thing is supposed to destroy an opposing military force and also it might kill a lot of people, you're like, yeah, that's what weapons are supposed to
It's
be
just
doing.
sort of Timon and Pumbaa standing over Simba, going, "Yeah, he's really dangerous, but what if he's on our side?"
Yeah.
A lot of my examples are from children's media. I'm so sorry. I am a parent of small children. This is my life.
Yeah, that happens, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense, right? Oh yeah, it's deadly, and
Absolutely.
that's good because we're gonna use it for deadly reasons.
Yeah. Or another thing that you also already brought up is like, I do think a lot of these people are huge dorks and they do want to live in a world where they can imagine themselves as the hero, and the starting point is maybe these people are like, oh, our job is now really important because we're the ones who have to make sure that the AI doesn't turn. And so like the activity that you're engaged in isn't just making money, it's also,
Yeah.
making sure the
Right.
world is safe. But then it really is like also a really convenient projection to have if you're one of these rich people, one of these billionaires, is a more general thing, right? Because there's a very, very real sense in which technology already is destroying the world, right? We know, like, there's no scientific doubt that we are currently in the process of, through our own technological means, making the planet not particularly habitable to people, right? We are destroying humanity. We are in the process of doing it. And there is, I think, a really important thing about to think through there, which is that technology is in a sense driving this, or technology under capitalism, right? In the sense that even if you're the head of ExxonMobil, you're not doing this because you want to destroy the world. You're doing this because that's how you make money, and your past investments have to make a profit, right? You're constrained by these past investments, and in the form of investments, this technology thereby means it has to keep running, right? And if the head of ExxonMobil says, actually, this is a really bad idea, we should stop doing this, then he will just get cast out and be replaced, right? So there's a
Right.
sense in which these are impersonal forces, that are impersonal forces that are destroying the planet, that cast for particular people to be the executors, but they don't really live in particular individuals.
Right.
Right. So we're kind of saying, well, there's already a sense in which technology really is autonomous and really is coming for us. It's just that's really technology in the form of capital that constrains our activities as long as we live in a market-based society that is structured around profit making, right? Where profit
Right.
is power and generates certain necessary moves and so on, right? It's a self-reinforcing feedback loop.
Sure. Yeah, we have this like quarter to quarter model of like short term, you have to show growth to the investors and to the board, or else you're in big trouble, right? And so you're going to take all
Right.
kinds of risks to get that done.
Exactly. And in that world, the billionaires are like, well, that is not, precisely because it's an impersonal force, right? That just gets personalized in particular people. That's so hard to imagine to fight, right? Like, how do you a way of organizing how we produce the things that we need in the world is not really a very personalizable enemy, like it's not the Terminator. You can't be like, oh, I finally figured out its weakness, here's how I'm going to fight it, especially not if you're a billionaire. So personalizing this technological threat in this AI, I think, is a very comforting bedtime story where you can imagine yourself as fighting something personal, right? The Terminator,
Right.
if you just crush it hard enough, it's gonna be gone. But you know how to crush things. You don't.
I don't
know
remember
how
what you do. I guess you can melt it, right?
Yeah, I think so.
With
I
the
mean,
feel like one time it's melted, and then one time it's.
That's Terminator 2, I think, where he
Yes.
fell into the molten metal.
I mean, again, to your point, it's where how do you fight the greed of humanity? That is an abstract battle, to be sure, but it seems to me that it is what she brings up children's books all the time and stories, but I often think of like the enthralldom to um capital, to money, as being sort of similar to Smaug the dragon, because all he has to do is give up the thing. All he's got to do is give up the thing that the sneaky little hobbits is trying to get, right? But he can't do it, and by not doing it, he ends up putting himself into a situation where he gets murked. And that is because of the greed. And I feel like we're in a similar situation sort of collectively, thanks to, as Caitlin so eloquently noted, like the dorks, and this is like
not to cast aspersions on dorks. I am literally wearing one of my favorite t-shirts, which is my Hitchhiker's House t-shirt.
No, but I mean, I think Hagen said it earlier, right? And it kind of like harkens back to our heroic masculinity discussion of like, the dork wants to be the hero. The dork wants to feel some like great responsibility and like power, whether it's to like save humanity from this dreadful evil which we're going to use for ourselves, or whether it's to like make it so that we can all like just do yoga in the middle of the day, but at the end of the day, as you noted, Hagen, it's to make money. And how do you
and we're not going to be doing yoga, we're going to be in the mines. And when I was looking through kind of what are people saying when they talk about AI in the abstract, I noticed this sort of wrestling a lot of the time, like especially Sam Altman, but not just Sam Altman. Like a lot of these guys who are like, well, AI contains the seeds of our destruction, and if it becomes too powerful, it might decide to murder us all because it is obviously a super genius person, like in a Marvel movie. And so the only way for us to stop that from happening is to put a lot of resources into AI right now so that we can like master it or design it in a way that it won't murder us all. And so like AI will kill us, so give me a lot of money to do AI is like that's the underpinning of this argument, which is like, I don't know, buddy, like the hero of Terminator was not the CEO of Skynet, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I want to push back just a little bit on the greed, not because I disagree, but because I think there's something maybe more fundamental at play than just the greed, which is that we have structured our economy in such a way that the greed is the all deciding factor, right?
Right.
Part of that is like we have decided. I mean, the liberal idea of what the world should be like is like, here's a domain that we call politics, over which we should ideally make democratic decisions. And then here's a domain that is economics, where individual decisions should rule, right? And individual decisions that are structured by the market. And in the market, the market generates things that we call externalities, right? So things where the person who causes a social harm is not the one who has to pay for it, right? And fossil fuels are kind of the biggest, most obvious, most important example of that, right? But we've structured this around, well, the person who has the money makes the decisions, and the person who has the money gets the profit. And so making this kind of decision is what enables you to be in the position to, in the future, make this kind of decision, right? But it is precisely because in that sense, it's the profit drive itself that forces that decision, right? That was the point about, well, if the CEO decides he doesn't want to do it, he gets cast
Yeah.
out. The system is already so distributed
Right.
that we can't actually get to make democratic decisions, right? So in my perspective, the solution is to figure out how can we get to make collective and democratic decisions in the realm of the economy, right? Like, how can we take that automatic decision making away from the market and this distributed system of decision making, and get to a system where we collectively, democratically can make rational decisions, precisely because nobody actually wants to destroy the world. Like, yes,
Well,
there's like 10 people, but like if we had a vote on should we destroy the world,
right.
I'm pretty sure the vote would
It
be
would come down on
overwhelmingly be like, no, let's
Yeah.
maybe not do that.
Right. But again, this is the sort of last bastion for the autocratic idea in a liberal society, is the business world, where we do get to act like autocrats. We do get to be in this hierarchy where we make the decision. And as you noted, 1,000%, I agree, trillion%. If he doesn't make it, he's getting replaced. There are so many in line who are like, I don't give a shit about that. That's crazy. You're crazy for thinking that we should value baby seals over oil. Like, you're nuts.
I think you make a really good point also in the book about how we're really confused about what is market and what is state, right? So like people are just like, oh yeah, well there's like the state and the government, and they are allowed to do some things. And then there's like the market, and whatever they do to the market is basically an interference or will like mess with us. But it's like, they created the market. Like the state, like the market exists because the state was created in the shape that it was, right? And so the people who are like, we want to see the regulatory state wither away, well, they're in power right now. And what's happening? Like, we've got shit in our water. We've got my kid's pediatrician is like, listen, if we hear something weird about vaccines, we're going to call you and you can get your next round early because we don't know what the hell's happening, right? Like, we've got like the withering away of the bureaucratic state. And then in the future, they're promising us things like freedom cities, which makes my skin crawl, which is like essentially company towns run by these like Silicon Valley companies where like you have basically no autonomy at all because you're just living under the thumb of your boss for your whole life. It's like, not to bring up Severance again, but it's like living in Kier, whatever state they're in, that's not a real state because it's PE. We've been calling it Pelaware in my family, but we don't know what it is. Right? Like, company towns are understood to not be a good thing, but that's like our tech utopia promise that we're being sold.
Yeah, it is. Also, like they basically, I think that they love the idea of basically not having one person, one vote, but having one tax dollar, one vote. Maybe you decide how many taxes you want to pay too, right? And so it's like, okay, but that's just a different way of saying the way that we should make rules is through generalized corruption, right? Normally that's called corruption when you buy laws.
Yeah, and that's what that is. It's like a formalized.
That's the utopian dream of the right now. Yes, yeah. I wonder if we should pivot to the other side and get to the why do these stories resonate?
Yes, please.
With people who aren't billionaires, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think like if you look at science fiction, there's always you can kind of like separate these stories into two narratives, right? There's the kinds of narratives that are about, oh, the machines are going to take over and control us, like the domination scenario, and then there's the Terminator scenario, which is like they're going to destroy us. And like I think there's always the kind of thing about, if you look at this in fiction, it's always like the robots that do construction or cleaning or mining. It's all the kind of jobs that are very underprivileged, that in all these intersections of the global north versus the global south, and the internal structure of class, the people in low income jobs, stuff around gender, it's all the kinds of things that are disprivileged in our society that kind of are put onto the robots and that are then presented as scary, right? So I think there's a real anxiety that people who aren't billionaires, but who are still having a relative privilege within the huge class of people that work for a living, right? That work for a wage. I think they're all in a real opposition to the billionaires, and that, like, one person pays another person to work, and so in that relation, there's a huge asymmetry about who gets to tell the other person what to do, right? So I think that's really the basic distinction that our society operates under. But then there's so many internal divisions among the people who work for a wage, right? So I think that's kind of one aspect that's really crucial in understanding these kinds of narratives. But then I think there's really also just very concrete things about the real use of technology in our world. And I think that like links back to the things about the artists that we've already talked about, right? So
Right.
so I think there's a deep sense in which technology is not just developed to increase productivity, right? Like, in a sense, that's what capitalism is good at. That is something that we would probably want whatever system we could live in our utopia to still have, right? Productivity increases are good. But if you're a capitalist, there's two ways in which you can increase your profit. One is you increase your productivity, right? Like, I don't know, let's say you're a capitalist who makes shoes. If people can make shoes faster, you're going to sell more shoes for the same amount of money. Good, you're increasing your profit. But what if you can just decrease the pay of people? They make the same amount of shoes, but they're cheaper now. And I think that you can call that de-skilling, right? You're transforming something that is paid as highly skilled labor into something that can be paid as less skilled labor, right? It has nothing to do with actual how much skill is involved. It has something to do with how easy is it to replace people, right? The high skilled labor tends to be people who are hard to replace because they have the kind of knowledge that it takes a really long time to acquire, or that, like, resources to acquire it are very limited, and so on, right? But if you think about AI from that perspective, and in this historical tradition, then AI is very clearly a tool to transform, aimed at transforming tasks that are high skill tasks into low skill tasks, right? If you think about, there's all this weird stuff about, like, here's an AI that is supposed to replace your paralegal. Here's an AI that is supposed to do therapy, whatever, all these kinds of things. And I think what is really crucial to like really like grab onto is the knowledge that we can simultaneously know that these things don't work well, right? They're not actually capable of replacing a high quality tutor or a high quality therapist or a high quality paralegal. But if an AI assisted person with no training can do the task at like 80% quality, right? Let's take the paralegal case, right? It's not going to play a role in the companies that have a, like, we need to be 100% right all the time, right? If you're a mergers and acquisitions law firm that does like contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, you're not going to use it. But if you're a public defender, and I'd say we have two public defenders. We have the good guy who's like, no, I really care about my clients. I think they deserve legal representation. I want to do right by them. And you have like one shark who's like, whatever, I want to just increase my case number. And if you're telling me with this AI, I can do twice as many cases, but I only win 80% of the amount that I won before. Yeah. That lawyer is going to be like, whatever.
That's okay.
Anyway, I don't really care. And the good guy lawyer now has competition. Yeah. Right? There's a sense in which at the lower end of all kinds of consumption, whether it's goods or services, a lot of people don't really have the choice, right? Like, there's so many people who buy clothing that exactly. Like, you think about clothing, or we call it the IKEA model. You think about IKEA furniture. Like, this is not like only the poorest people. It's like everybody has IKEA furniture because IKEA furniture is so much cheaper than furniture that you can move with. Like, exactly.
The desk you're sitting on right now.
And they got Schmallen Forest for the children, so it's all good.
Right. So there's a sense in which, like, the decrease in quality that comes with it can still be very, very profitable. But what the effect of that is to transform good jobs into bad jobs. Right. Like the lawyer that wanted to do a good job and wanted to do it right by his clients now has to compete with this shit thing, and he can no longer offer the kind of quality that he wanted to because the market rates are now down, and therefore he can't charge what he would have to charge in order to go do a good job anymore. Right. So we see this kind of as a generalization. And so that's a real fear that people have. I think that that there's a doom thing coming for them, right? Where so this is kind of another aspect of fear, or in more immediate ways, there's often like these machines are often used to just directly control people, surveil people, right? So Amazon is using a warehouse AI, a video classification software, right? So it is it's presumably trained on giant amounts of videos of just people in warehouses, so that the machine learning system learns what a normal video from an Amazon warehouse looks like, and then the machine is supposed to later determine whether somebody made a mistake, right? So a lot of this video is sent to people who classify it, and then it's fine-tuned on these like video classifications, right? So then the machine starts to classify stowing activity as, I guess this person is fast and good, and this person is making this kind of mistake, whatever, right? So, but what is happening there is that we are really replacing something that used to be management with a kind of industrially produced management, right? This is like something that used to be a human oversight thing becomes mediated by a machine, right? Mediated in the sense that clearly somebody's still looking at the output of these machines, but to the worker, right? Why wouldn't that obviously be like, well, yeah, you're dominated by a machine now, right? Like in a very real sense, you're still dominated by a person, right? Like ultimately, there's a pyramid that goes to Jeff Bezos, who sits on the top, right? And there's a recursive oversight relations, but these kinds of levels at which, yeah, you get what we say, you get a human relation of dominance, right? One person is your manager. You know that he's your manager, and he tells you what to do. That person has power over you, right? That is again as you said, we have the dictators in the private realm,
Right.
We have a recursive pyramid of dictatorships.
Wow.
Within the company with Bezos at the top.
That sounds like such a great metal album name. I'm sorry.
Of dictators, yeah. And then it's just like a guy in a bad suit.
And we're replacing that human relation of dominance with a machine mediated relation of dominance, right?
Right.
So in that sense, yeah, of course, that person will find a resonance in a story about machines taking over, right?
Sure.
And one of the fascinating things is that this is, of course, not the first time this is happening. If you look at the introduction of the steam engine into clothwork, you get very much the same kind of stories. You know, the Andreas Malm in his Fossil Capital and Brian Merchant in Blood in the Machine both work on this, and they both have amazing quotes from people. You know, it's so class divided too. It's like the rich people are like, there's creativity embedded in these machines. They basically have a soul. They can almost think. You know, they say the same kind of stuff about the steam engine that they now say about AI. And the workers are like, wow, this is like a demon that's coming to control me.
Right.
And again, you have the same kind of replacement of, like, you had a manual workshop with oversight by people, and you replaced it with a machine that on the one hand could really produce faster, right? So it came with the productivity increase, but it also had that managerial function, because the steam engine allows the owner to set the speed at which the machine runs. And now the worker doesn't anymore, right? You had a hand cranked spinning Jenny thing. The worker set the speed, right? That's why you needed somebody doing the oversight. Somebody had to stand there and be like, I paid for this machine. I paid for this material. I paid for your labor. You better hurry up, right? There's always this conflict between the worker wants to, work at a dignified and safe speed, and the capitalist, like, I don't really care if you lose a finger. I have a buck to make, right? But with the steam engine, he now sets the speed at which the machine runs. He no longer has to do the same kind of immediate oversight, because the worker loses a finger if he doesn't work as fast as the machine runs, right?
That's the machine.
Exactly. But so the same principle applies, right? We have taken something that used to be oversight or management, and we have embedded that function in the machine. And of course, the worker now experiences that machine as oppressive, right?
also a really interesting point that you make in the book too, which is it creates this like another step away from responsibility for the outcome. If it's a bad outcome, like, well, the machine, it's, machines, they're just a tool, what can I say, right? As opposed to you having stood over the worker being like, faster, damn you. It was just a setting. I don't know, it was a setting on the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see this all over the place, right? And I think that is one of the things that makes calling it artificial intelligence so attractive too, right? Because that makes it look as if the computer could take responsibility, but of course it doesn't. It just means the responsibility buck doesn't get passed on. It just stops somewhere where nobody's responsible, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that is
We
a
love
real
doing this, right?
crucial-
Where we imagine like a mind and intentions behind machines, and we also do it to markets, right? Where we're like, oh yeah, there's
Right.
an invisible
course.
hand or whatever. That's like that's what the market is doing. It's like we always have to put God in there somewhere, or a demon, depending on how we're feeling about it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Hagen, I have a bit of an abstract question, but since this whole discussion is verging on that, I don't feel so out of place. My question is something that crosses my mind, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. The anxiety, right, that's felt from this one class, the ones who are getting orders taken from machines in so many ways. Well, it strikes me that in the haste and desire for us to sort of replace, as you noted, like work in some way, whether it's a higher quality work that we can now do at a lower quality level with this help, or whether it's an assist in the form of a steam engine, it feels as though we're constantly concerned with taking work away to some degree. But to Caitlin's point, we're not getting the yoga utopia, because if we were getting that utopia, then we could like start getting paid to paint, to like practice painting or practice writing. We don't have any easier way into those fields that are supposed to be opening to us with the innovations of AI. I guess my question, sir, is more, how do you see it? How do you see the relationship between thinking of new things for us to do and sort of minimizing the work that we've traditionally done?
Yeah, I think this is another very strange thing about capitalism, that it's like it generates the promise of liberating us from drudgery. It generates continually technological possibilities to do that, but then it also creates the social conditions that make it impossible to do that.
Right.
Right.
Because the money that is made is now no longer going to you if you're out of a job.
Right.
It is now going to the person who owns the machine, right? So you're just kind of fucked.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you weren't liberated from work. You were liberated from making a living.
Yeah.
Right.
Elon Musk said we could have a universal salary 1 year ago. So now that he's the president, why aren't we getting that?
Right. Yeah. Or like the Keynesians in the 50s. I mean, I think Keynes personally was like, well, look at here's how the productivity figures go. I assume that by like the year 2000 or whatever, I think he thought we were going to work 8 hours a week.
Yeah.
At the same standard of living, and it's like, well, we don't. I mean, I don't know.
No,
Anybody
we
who's
work
like,
more. Yeah.
yeah,
No,
living standards
it
have
feels
stagnated since the
right.
70s.
It
Right.
feels really parallel to like the false promise of hustle culture that we have too, right? Where it's like, well, just like nose to the grindstone, like every second, just be grinding away at what? I don't really want to talk about it. At something, like just be a hustler, right?
Right.
Enroll in my hustlers university and pay me lots of money for me to tell you that like if you tell your uncle to drive Uber, now you're entitled to like 5% of his income because you hustled for him. Right, like where it's like, okay, so you're generating nothing of value, you're just like working because you heard you have to work, and no one's like actually, you'd be better off working a normal job.
Right.
But there aren't that many normal jobs anymore, right? A lot of these jobs never let go of you. You're like on Slack all the time, or you're whatever. You can get called in at any time.
Right.
And it's also precarious. You can lose it in the blink of an eye.
Right. And this is another thing that I think will be, in many realms, will be intensified by artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
Precisely because these kinds of jobs are very much, again, about how replaceable are you from the perspective of the capitalist, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, well, if you're an Uber driver, Uber is like, well, we want to have X many drivers, so they don't care about you, right? Like maybe nobody at Uber even knows you exist because they only interface with you through an app, right? Like it's also the depersonalization also from the other side, right? Like the Amazon manager or the Uber manager doesn't have to deal with the fact that it's actually a human doing this, right? That mediation also protects their own psychological well-being while they're doing horrible stuff, which like in the small window may look nice, somebody's psychology is better, but in the big window it enables them to do more awful stuff.
Well, as was noted, Hagen, this is at the very beginning of the episode, the sort of decoupling of responsibility, right? So now we're firing a nameless, faceless individual. They are just somebody who comes in and picks up the food and then leaves. I don't really know them. They signed up on the app, and I don't have to even consider that they've got a family, that this is like important to their livelihood, but neither does the person who's delivering the food. They're just delivering a smelly bag to a doorstep over and over again.
I don't know how they don't eat what's in that bag. It's got to be so nice.
AI wouldn't. AI wouldn't eat.
Well, we used to have, like, I feel like I went to, I think it was UC Berkeley, and I was walking around and there was one of those little, like, it was essentially a cooler on wheels with like a little flag. And we just stood there and watched it try to cross a street for like 15 minutes. We're like, oh boy, someone's lunch is getting cold. Oh no.
That's what the box is for, right?
Yeah.
Keep it warm. Yeah. Right, but so I think that gig thing and that knowledge thing are going to interact more and more precisely because these are tools that are trying to move knowledge from workers into the tool itself, right? Like if you think especially about generative AI, I think now nobody has told it better than Apple when they had this Crush video ad. I don't know if you saw that, but they had like this giant hydraulic press, and it was full of like beautiful instruments and an architectural diorama and all kinds like cameras. All kinds of things that represented like creative human endeavors, the kind of labor that humans can make meaning with. And then this hydraulic press crushes it all down. And then the iPad is left, right? And people really hated it. But
no kidding.
me amongst them. Yeah. Terrible.
But it represented exactly this drive to be like, can we take something that's knowledge and remove it from the people, because people can derive special bargaining power in the marketplace as workers from that special knowledge if it has economic applications, right? Can we take it and put it in a tool? Because if it's in the tool, then it belongs to the person who hires you, essentially, right? If it's in the tool, you can't get special bargaining power from it, right? There's all kinds of ways in which this happens to knowledge all the time. We produce new knowledge as a society, but we also constantly, from the top, constantly try to make sure that nobody gets to have higher wages, right? Because of course the boss wants to pay wages that are as low as possible. Again, this has nothing to do with them being a bad person. This has everything to do with how the incentive structure itself generates certain impulses. Right? And so in this case, we're really trying to put knowledge into the tool. Another way of doing this is, like sometimes good, sometimes bad. Like nobody gets to derive special bargaining power from reading anymore, because we just made sure that everyone can read, right? That is another way of being like, well, now it's no longer special knowledge, right? So there's tugging and moving in different directions that is generated by these economic impulses.
It's funny that the ad was like instruments and paintings and things, and not like artists and musicians under the hydraulic press. Like, oh, people would never have accepted that.
Yeah, exactly. But artists are very aware at this particular moment that this is a tool that is trying to make them more replaceable, make their work cheaper. Be like, oh, but can't you just do that with an AI? It is an attempt of transforming things into more gig work.
And that their previous works are getting fed into it as training data.
Exactly.
So like,
Yeah.
Right.
they consider that a form of plagiarism, and I don't blame them, right? But
Right.
like,
Certainly.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, we recently had this whole thing with the Ghibliification, right? So people
Right.
are still doing it. Stop doing it.
Right.
People
Stop
are like
doing it.
feeding images into the I think it's OpenAI, right? That
Yeah.
is letting you like turn any image into something in the
Studio
art
Ghibli.
style of Studio Ghibli, which
Mm.
like again removes you from any knowledge that you might have about the way that studio and how Hayao Miyazaki views humanity and art and artificial intelligence, right? He's like extremely not interested in being involved in
But
artificial intelligence.
as Hagen said, it makes this what was, if you know the individual, right, the head of the studio, the if you understand his mindset, you know that this is anathema. This is
Yeah, you do.
absolutely the last thing that he would want, and that it is, as Hagen said, just an attempt to make this a disposable commodity, something that is brilliant and beautiful, now just disposable. We put the worst picture we can find in to like see
Well,
how
that's the
goofy it
thing, right?
looks.
So the White House took a photo of a woman being taken
Ugh,
away by ICE, right? Um, in the one of the
grotesque.
worst moments of her whole life, right? Just total pain on her face. She's cuffed. There's ICE agents all around. They put it through the filter, and that's on purpose, right? That is a specific message to like all of you fruity communist jerks out there that are into like art and like human endeavors and valuing humanity. We own you, right? That is an actual message directly. And like they chose the Ghibli filter because it was having a moment, but also because it is a message, right?
First you take the word, then you take the meaning. First you take the artwork, and then you absolutely destroy it so that it's representing like fascists, right? The studio,
Yeah.
something that was beautiful and hand drawn and made with care and love is now depicting some poor woman being arrested for nothing. Yeah.
And like computer animation in itself is not a problem, right? It is a tool. One of the great movies
Sure.
of last year was Flow, which was created using a free software uh, by a Latvian studio, hooray for Latvia, about a little black cat that goes on an adventure in a mysteriously flooded environment. It's a great movie. I recommend it. It is completely wordless. There's no words in it at all. It's just
Love
like cat
that.
sounds and dog sounds and bird
I
sounds.
love it.
It's really good. You will cry. It is so good. And like again, like this was created with total intentionality, right? Like the people who made it, the director has talked about how like the dog character is modeled on real video of his real dog, and it has this like love that he has for this yellow lab that's been in his life. And that's also a computer generated set of images, but again, directed by and honed by the intentionality of the people who had a vision.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the part of the show. We always have one part of a show where Caitlin just gets mad and yells a lot. So
No,
thank
that's
you
good.
for
There's a lot
bearing
to
with
get
me.
mad about. There's a lot of things to get mad. We need definitely more people to get more mad, I think.
Well, I'm
Right.
here to carry my part of that burden.
And
I'm
Hagen,
always
I'll rant anytime, just like Caitlin. So
Yeah. Yeah. Which, yeah, so maybe we should talk a bit about what can people do to push
yeah, that's a
back,
great place to end.
right?
I think let's do that.
So what I've been thinking, I've been like doing a couple book readings, and I've been talking to a lot of people who, yeah, are encountering AI in their jobs, right? It's like being pushed on everyone from educators to therapists to lawyers to like it's really really hard to escape this.
Yeah.
I I I suspect there's not a thing that can be the same thing in every sector, but we already know in a sense that the only thing that helps against attacks from above is collective organizing in the workplace. That's the one thing that you can do. But I think there's often big hurdles to that. It's not easy to do that. So I think in a lot of domains, it's really interesting to think about the the special conjunction of this moment. This is a technology that is both there to depress your wages, so you should want to push back against that. But then a lot of people will feel like, oh, but won't I be left behind if I just oppose AI, right? Like that's kind of the pitch. And this is not a crazy idea, right? It is true because you have this AI competition, right? That was the story of the lawyer earlier.
Right.
But I think in this particular moment, the kinds of tasks that this is coming for, we could call it like the process of industrialization is coming for, like the kind of artisanal tasks that didn't lend themselves to industrialization before, right? Like therapy is not a mass product, it's an individualized product. But what these machines are promising is that you can get something that is kind of like industrial production, but also individualized, right? But I think the professional ethics really, really deeply combines with the potential for collective organized pushback, right? So if you're working in therapy and your bosses tell you you need to have an AI agent that is like listening in and summarizing and whatnot, and you know, oh, this is going to increase my caseload because they're going to cut, like 6 months later, they're going to cut the half hour that you have after the session where you think about the session and summarize for yourself and think about where you'd go with the therapy, right? They're like, no, the bot has already done that for you. So now we're cutting this half hour down to like 5 minutes and you have to increase your caseload, right? So that that will undermine quality. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that in their own domain where they work, they know this much better than I do, of course, right? Everybody knows their own workplace is the best, so they should think about this. But I think, that professional ethics of like people want to do a good job, like especially these kinds of, whether it's artists or therapists, people are often in these domains, and especially in the most threatened domains, right? It's the public defender who's more threatened by it than the merger and acquisition lawyer. They're in this because they think this is a meaningful thing that helps people, that has a positive impact on the world. They want to do something that means something, and so there's a professional ethics to push back from, right? Like as a therapist, you could say this is not acceptable as a quality undermining tool, and we need to organize not just because we want to defend our wages, but because we want to defend what it means to do this task, what it means to be in medicine, in law, etc. And there's often already some organic structure that exists, right? So if we think about the law, there's already the bar, right? So there's already some organizations that maybe can be used, right? In medicine, there's lots of organizations that set standards. So there already in many domains are collective forms of bringing in concerns about the quality of the work that are supposed to be not just market-based, right? That is already in a recognition that the market can actually be creating forces that are bad for the thing that you're trying to do. So I think for people to think about in their own workplaces, in their own domains where they are, how can I organize collective pushback? How can I convince my coworkers that this is something that we need to take seriously and that we need to worry about it undermining the quality of our work, not because we buy the hype and we think that, yes, these machines are just going to be capable of doing everything, but precisely because these machines will undermine the quality of work and wages, right? Because they're tools for class war from above. I think that's just what I want to hammer into people's heads. They're not tools for productivity increases primarily. They're primarily tools for undermining wages.
The other kind of profit.
Man. That's going to be a great quote. That's going to be a marvelous quote.
That's going on the social media post. Well, Hagen, thank you so much for speaking with us. Why We Fear AI is a new book published by Common Notions. It has a great cover. It is so good. It is by Hagen and Ingeborg Glimmer, and it's a great book. Really beautiful. I loved it. Thank you for letting me read it.
Thank you for reading it.
And this has been Half the Answer, where understanding a question is half the answer.
Thanks for listening to Half the Answer, presented by Liberal Currents. You can find Half the Answer anywhere you get your podcasts. Liberal Currents is an entirely listener and subscriber-funded publication, which includes programs like Half the Answer and Neon Liberalism. So, if you like what you've heard and wish to contribute, you may do so at liberalcurrents.com and through Patreon. And remember, understanding a question is half the answer.